At the top of this thing, I start out with some things that they need to hear. Those people that need to be here. I was told that, let's see, what did she tell me? That this was supposed to be about studying. But I'm going to talk about studying and testing, and I want to start out with some really basic stuff. This is my shorthand, so I hope this makes some sense to you. Maybe you can make some notes of your own if you want to. Why are y'all here? I mean, in this particular room, I mean, did you come? Some of y'all just came because you felt like you ought to. I know you guys. I didn't make you guys come. I mean, I don't know if some of y'all came because somebody said they'd give you extra points or whatever. I hope you're here because, not because you have to be, but because you're smart. And a lot of people think, well, if they're smart, why would they have to come? It's because people I don't think, understand what smart means. I'm going out of order a little bit. But smart, what is that? Does that mean that is a smart person somebody that is just equipped with so much gray matter that they don't have to do any work or anything like that? Absolutely not. Smart, y'all have heard me say this, smart means you got sense enough to know, or sense enough to do what you need to do for you, right? So again, unfortunately, we're probably preaching to the choir here. We got the people who don't need to hear this as much. So to those people, I would ask why they are here at college. You guys know there's all kinds of wrong reasons why people come to school, like Mama said to, or they didn't want to have to get a job, and all these things that just don't work. If you're here for the right reasons, I don't have to talk to you, right? If you're at school because you understand that college is an opportunity to prove yourself, that's largely what it is. The knowledge and the skills that you learn in some majors, for sure, the knowledge and the skills that you learn here aren't as important as the fact that you're proving your willingness to work to accomplish something, and your mental ability to do what you have to do. I've hired people, and I've been in research, been in the pharmaceutical industry, been in food industry in several places before I came here, and that's what I wanted to know about somebody, was were they willing to work. If you're willing to work, then you're worth hiring. And again, that's largely what college is about. I say on here somewhere, where did I say? The second point, high school versus college, the right to an education versus a privilege to prove yourself. Wow, I could get real political. I don't want to do that. I got to be careful, especially since I'm being recorded. Can't mention any names. Politically, it looks good, and I'm not talking about anybody who works here.
Okay.
Politically, it looks good. Sounds good to be able to suggest that everybody is going to receive it. We're going to do what it takes for everybody to receive a degree by age whatever, and that ain't the way it is, politicians. That ain't the way it is. If we turn college into that, it wouldn't be worth anything. Okay? Everybody isn't going to succeed, right? And for the most part, it's because they're not going to do the work. Y'all have heard me say this, and y'all will too. Work, work, work. Work's what it's all about. I know some people with high IQs. I'm thinking of a name right now. I'm sure I'm going to say it. A brilliant person who came to this college, and I don't know if they're sacking groceries or what. Potential is just that, right? There's a whole bunch of people out there with potential who who aren't going to make it because they're just not willing to do the work. So, unlike high school, you're not guaranteed of anything in college. If you were, it wouldn't be worth anything. Some people are going to make it. Okay. Again, I'm preaching to the choir. These aren't the people we need here. We need the people who need to be here. The people who didn't come to class today. So, like I say, the value of a degree depends on the challenge. It's a proving ground. Not all will succeed. It's like we're a filter, right? Filter. Separate them who won't from them who will. Not them who can and them who can't. Because I bet everybody here, everybody at CVCC, not just in this room, of course, but everybody here has the mental ability to succeed at this level. So, as a scientist, I teach biology and microbiology and other types of ologies and histories, by the way. And as a scientist, I have a great appreciation for evolution. And what did I say anyway? Oh, competition, competition. How many times have we said that already in microbiology? We're in our third week. We talk about it in general biology. Like it or not, folks, this is the real world. It's not all going to be okay. The best you can do is the best you can do. It's all about competition. Work hard, right? Work hard to get what you want. Again, how many times have I said work already? We've been doing this for 6 minutes now. So before we go any further, I say here that I teach science, and the nature of learning in science is a little different than the nature of learning in some other classes. As a science person and a science instructor, I'm going to deliver this kind of from my own point of view. So it's not exactly the same for all students or all degree fields, but for the most part it all applies. Did anybody, you want one of these? Just for fun?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And, oh, y'all talk. I don't want this to be pitch and catch. I want to hear from you guys. We'll get into some parts where you can do it. I can do it right now if you want. But we'll certainly get into some things down here where I hope we'll talk soon, you and me. And again, I'm sure there's things that I haven't thought about to put on here. If somebody else were doing this, they would probably include some things that I haven't. This is what I find to work best. So, what do you got to do? What are some necessities? What are some things that are required for success in college? And the first one I put there is brains. And I put that first to make the point that that's nobody's excuse. There's nobody at CVCC, I bet, who doesn't have the gray matter, the ability to succeed. So let's get rid of that right now. That's nothing but an excuse. So I've already told y'all what smart means. Smart means you got sense enough to do what you need to do for yourself, right? Second thing I put down here is desire. Wow, that's a huge one. Again, you guys have it. That's why you're here. I know the answer to this already. Do you know anybody who is or has gone to college who didn't have the desire to succeed? Yep. You can't make somebody want to do something. Those of us with children know that. Those of us who were children know that, right? We've all been there in one way or another. And I think that's all of us, right? We were all children at one point in time. You're pretty young. I bet I know who you are. I could be wrong, but I bet I know who you are. All right. Why do they do that? Why do people come to school? Why do people come to college, spend somebody's money, waste time, and they don't even really want that degree? What do you think? Help me. It's so frustrating. Go ahead.
I was going to say parents. You know, the person that I know who went to college is still in undergraduate, her 9th year now, in undergraduate work.
Wow.
Just because she doesn't want to be there, but her parents are forcing her to go
In her 9th year,
of undergrad.
I would suggest that they're not only forcing her to go, but they are empowering her to be able to continue to waste somebody's money in her own time. For people who don't have that desire, life is a great, life teaches you a lot of lessons, right? My second time around students, I like to call them retreads. They come here, they blow an opportunity, they go find out what the real world's like, they sack groceries, or they find out that life is tough, and then they come back and they got a whole different attitude about things. Wow, I've tried to coach those people so much, but again, you can't make people want to do something. I wish I had the formula for that. So again, the word discipline there. What is discipline? Golly, I wish I had a dictionary. I don't need a dictionary. What does discipline mean? Discipline is I can't use the word discipline. Discipline is the drive to do what you don't want to do to get what you want in life, really, isn't it? Parents, I'm going all over the place, and that's what I'm always going to do. Be good parents. What are good parents? Are good parents people who give their kids everything they want and don't let them deal with some hardship? Heck no. That's how you learn discipline, right? So again, I bet your friend has been taken too good care of. They've been empowered to mess up their own life. It comes down to making a decision, doesn't it? What do I want in life, and is it worth the work? And if you haven't made that decision, you're wasting your time. But you have. So again, I'm preaching to the choir. I put down some names here. Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Ray Lewis, and some other great athletes. A lot of people have this idea that, wow, it's easy for them. They were just born with this ability, and they certainly do have a lot of ability. But that's 3 names. That's survey athletes over time, and that's 3 names that come up all the time for some of the hardest working people you've ever known. So again, this idea that some people have this idea that they have all this built-in ability and it's just all going to work out. They're wrong. It takes work. Time. Well, I've heard so many times from students, kid late class this morning, well, my job, and somebody doesn't do well on a test, and I ask them how long they studied, and they say something like an hour, which of course it ain't gonna work in a class of mine. And they say why, and they give me this list of reasons, and it's, you know better than that. And so I ask them, what time did you know what time this class met in lab when you signed up for it? And of course they did. And I asked them honestly, how much work a week did you think it was going to take to be successful? And they most of the time, if they'll be honest, they had a pretty good idea. And so then you ask them, what do they spend their time doing? Well, I work a 40-hour job and da-da-da-da-da. And then you want to ask, can you add? Can you add? There's not enough hours in the day, there's not enough hours in a week to do everything you just said, which means you got to prioritize, right? A lot of students don't succeed because they don't have enough time, and they don't have enough time because they didn't prioritize. Do you have that problem? And I always do this in class. Let's do it in here. How many people in here are busy? See? It's always 100%. What do you do that you could put off until later? What do you do that you could get rid of in your life as a time expenditure? A lot of people talk about work. My mom and dad, who were depression parents, and thank goodness, always said, it's more about how much you save than how much you make. And it's true. And in terms of time, and in terms of money spent, just don't need as much money. Now that we can talk about that for your whole life, but certainly while you're a student. You know, somebody says, well, I got a 40, I got to work this job. Why do you have to work this job? Well, I've got a car payment. Well, how much is your car payment? And they tell me, why is your car payment that much? Well, what kind of car do you have? Why? What's wrong with driving a beater, right? For a few years. What's wrong with driving? I've got a 22-year-old truck right now, and I'm rebuilding it. And it's not because I can't afford another one. It's because why in the world would you do that to yourself, especially as a student? So my point here is, if your time is spent working, need less money. Make a decision, right? Go into poverty. You're supposed to have to do that when you go to college. That's good for you. Y'all aren't talking because you feel like I'm beating you, like my kid, who's a good kid, because I used to beat her. And I brag about that all the time, in a good way, in a good way.
Well, I don't work outside of going to school.
Good.
But, you know, I try to stay at school and go to the library if I'm going to study. Because I know if I go home, I'm going to think that that laundry is important. And I'm going to think that the dishes are important. And I'm going to think that the dust bunnies in the corner are important. And I'm going to spend my time making the house look spotless. And there will always be another excuse. And that whole day will go by and I might get in a half an hour of studying. Whereas I go over to the library and do some concentrated studying for an afternoon. I get more done in that afternoon than I could get done in 2.5 days at home.
Here's something that's not on the list.
Like all of that stuff will wait. You know, do I have the time to study? Yeah. But because all of that crap can wait, the dust bunny might get a little bit bigger and the pile of dishes might get a little bit bigger. But sooner or later, if there isn't any silverware or dishes, the kids will actually wash something, actually do something for themselves.
Well, you just gave me a little bit of information. I was going to say something for students who are parents or husbands or wives, and this would make some people mad at home, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you're part of a family, is the work you're doing only to benefit you, or is it to benefit your family? Some people need to have a little talk with their family and say, listen, I'm doing all this work and it's going to help you too. Somebody needs to pick up some of the slack. And again, there's some people at home that wouldn't like hearing that. I had somebody in my office just last year and there was a little fight going on at home about that. So, yeah, just remind somebody that I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this for us. Team at home. So I made the point there about there are some have-tos, absolutely, but you gotta make some tough decisions some of the time. Environment. You need to know what works for you in terms of study, right? I had to find a quiet place. Totally. Some people think they can study with the music playing or the TV on or whatever. I bet if we did an experiment, we'd have to think about how to design this experiment in all of our independent variables and perform controlled experimentation, but I bet we could do that. I bet if we did an experiment, 90-some% of the people who say they can study as effectively with this external information, I bet they'd find out they're wrong. But anyway, you got to find what works for you, right? And you got to be honest about it, like all this other stuff. You can't tell yourself, I can do this while I study, if it doesn't. And then make it happen. Again, with kids and stuff around, you got to have a quiet place, and it doesn't work at home. Too too bad, people, somebody's got to take care of the kids while I go somewhere and study, or shut up, or whatever you got to do. You got to find what works for you. Have you done that? Go
I
ahead.
found that groups, like I remember in A&P, you know, like a group of girls, we all knew each other, and they're like, oh, let's get together and study in a group. I found out real quick, I heard a bunch of people's gonna say, I can't do that. I can't, because when I'm studying, I've got, like you said, time is very precious to me. I've got a family, a job, and everything else, so I allot this amount of time that I can study. And if I got all my friends there, studying, and then we're talking about what's on Facebook, and we're talking about, you know, this and this and that and the other, and I'm not like that. I've got this amount of time to do this, and so I had to do that. I mean, I ended up hurting feelings, but in the long run, it helped me out. I'm not the one crying at the end of A&P because I got to see,
Right.
you know, and I think that was a big thing, which I think comes with age. I mean, when I was fresh out of high school, I probably couldn't have done that. I couldn't have got away from my friends as easily, but, you know, now I just had to tell them, I'm like, no, study group thing's not working for me. Y'all go do that if that's what works for you, but I would do, like you said, Tuesdays is my day when I don't have to go back to work. So noon after lab, that's where I park myself until my night class. And I stay there and I study whatever I gotta get done and go to my class. And I couldn't ever go home, it will never get done.
I was the same way. I have a totally quiet environment. What I find, and again, some people might work well in the study group. Of course, you got to be real selective about the people you study with. But what I find in study groups most of the time is there's leeches, and then there's the other folks, right? Don't hook yourself up with a leech, right? So if you don't have somebody, now what I have done effectively in the past when I was a student is I'd find somebody who was a really good student who I didn't feel like would hurt me, and we'd study independently, and then we'd come together and ask questions out of our notes. That's something you might try. That's always worked for me. Let's see. Next thing on the list, next necessity is confidence, and that's the hardest thing in the world to coach somebody through, and I'm going to talk about it more down at the bottom when we get to testing. But it's not just about testing, and that's why I put it up here. There was a time back when I was an undergraduate that I had a confidence issue in terms of success as a student. And what I found I would do is while I was studying, I was really telling myself, I don't understand this, instead of getting that voice out of my head and just doing the work and understanding it. So one of my stupid analogies I always use is, like Nike says, just do it. Don't worry about doing it while you're studying. Do any of y'all do that? Do you find yourself, and you can say it to me or you can say it to yourself, because that's what really matters. Do you hear, is there that voice in your head while you're trying to learn this stuff saying, I don't understand this, I don't understand this, but you just keep on going anyway because you feel like you got to get done, but you ain't accomplishing nothing, okay? Again, that's a horribly difficult thing to get past. It was a very frustrating for me, and it was a tough thing, but I had an epiphany one day in 1980, I don't remember what. I was in Auburn, and I was taking organic chemistry, and I don't remember what all that semester. And I realized my study time was very ineffective because of this, and I just quit one day and I said, I'm going to really, really, honestly give it everything I've got, and if I can't do it, I'll do something else. And that's easy to say, but it's another thing when you really mean it, okay? It's like the willingness to go out and turn the key and drive to California. It's easy to say, but do you have the real will to do it? It's a matter of real willpower. You tell yourself, I'm going to quit worrying about failing. I'm going to do my very best, and if after I've done my very best I can't succeed, then I'm going to move on to plan B, and then the pressure disappears. But you gotta have that honest contract with yourself, because there's a whole lot of people, most of the people, use that as an excuse to go ahead and fail and feel okay about it. There's a big difference there. Does that make any sense? It's a tough thing. So confidence is big. Now I say there, know the stuff, but that really comes down here in testing, test anxiety. That's another kind of confidence issue, and we'll talk about that later. And finally, and maybe this is really the focus of this thing, if you've got all those necessities, you actually have to study. And so let's talk about that some. Again, it differs some for every course, but for, in large part, the same tricks work, or the same, I hate to call them tricks, the same whatever works for most people. And then the first one right off the bat, that seems like a no-brainer, but it happens way too much, is you got to listen, okay? I had people in lab today who I could see hadn't listened to some things that I'd already said to you guys half a dozen times. You got to listen. The syllabus. I don't know about the syllabi in your classes, but my syllabi have a ton of information in them. And there's some of that information that you absolutely have to pay attention to, or you're not going to succeed. Well, you guys know there's some people, you can say it, you can make them read it, you can shove it down their throat, and they're still not going to hear it. You have to listen, right? So again, read the syllabus, listen to your instructors, do what you're told, do what you're told. My classes aren't easy, and I'm going to make dang sure they never are, because then people aren't growing in my classes. They're not learning anything. They're not stretching themselves, being forced to work. But I tell my students, and I say this and I say it over and over again, I tell my students what they need to make a 100. Okay? It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, because I promise you it's not going to be easy. But I tell my students everything they need to know to make a 100. And every instructor should. Now, you know, sometimes that means you tell them, you got to read this book, you got to do whatever. And more than 9 out of 10 times when students say, well, they didn't tell us blah or blah, yeah, they did. You just didn't hear it. So pay attention, of course, of course. By the way, if you're paying attention and you don't get something, what should you do? Ask, ask, ask. I didn't put that on here, but I should. There's all kinds of reasons why people just sit there and just take it like medicine or like a beating, and they don't do their part. Learning, folks, isn't pitch and catch. Learning is interactive, right? If you can't ask questions, if you can't approach your instructor, then let somebody know, because that's our job. Ask questions if you don't understand something. Let's see here. So, the next thing under studying I've got there is to be there. That's not as obvious as it sounds. The obvious part is, of course, you've got to be there in body. I hope your course and your instructor are demanding enough that you can't get away with not being in class, if it's a face-to-face class. But for a whole lot of people, that doesn't mean physically being there. That means being there. There's a whole lot of people that are sitting in classes that aren't getting much of what's going on because their mind is somewhere else. We did a little survey a little while ago. I asked how many of y'all are busy. Let me do another one. How many of y'all have problems? Yeah, I knew the answer to that one too. Leave your blank at the door, okay? Put it in your pocket. Do whatever you got to do to it. But it's not good enough just to be here physically. You got to be here mentally, okay? And we all, that's a tough one, right? I mean, we all have to battle that. But it's willpower like everything else. Y'all jump in. I'm getting sick of talking. Don't miss class. Oh, yeah, golly. This is something that certainly applies to my classes, probably more than some others. I'm a notes kind of guy. I am the textbook in my classes. So for me, in my classes, a huge part of student success is taking notes, not having notes. If you're in a class where you need to take notes, and that's important, hear me, it's not about having the notes. You might know somebody who made 100 in the course and you got a copy of their notes. That's the worst thing you can do, burn them. Because it's not about having the notes, it's the process of hearing, understanding, asking questions if you don't understand, processing it, turning it into your own words and writing it down. Okay? It's not about having notes, it's about taking notes. Hugely important. Pay attention. We already talked about that. Interact during class. Semesters, fall's a good semester to use as an experiment here because during the fall I have 3 sections of a single course. And every class has its own personality, and that's one cool thing about teaching is, well, that just makes it kind of interesting. But almost all the time, didn't totally work last semester, but almost all the time, the groups of students who are the most interactive do the best. And again, every class has a personality. A lot of times that personality of the class is determined by just a few people. Almost all the time it's determined by the right people. If it's not, that's part of our job, is to squelch the problems. But anyway, classes that are interactive almost always do better. Do you ask questions in class? And you're sitting there saying, well, I'm shy. Get over it. Get over it. Just do it. Again, well, from an instructor's point of view, perspective, if you're a good instructor, and I try to be, wouldn't it be stupid for me to present information or present an idea in one way when I knew another idea worked better? Don't you think I do what I think works best? Okay? Well, I depend on the students to point out the weaknesses in my delivery, right? If I'm trying to get an idea across and it's not working, I need to know that. Well, I don't know it if you don't tell me. So, ask questions, interact in the class. It doesn't just help you, but it helps everybody else in the room. If you don't understand something, there's a good idea other people in the room other people don't understand it too. And again, it helps me realize that there's a better way I can do it, which helps you in a roundabout way. So it's really success squared in terms of your interaction. And y'all aren't interacting at all. You don't have to take a test, by the way, at the end.
She thinks you're kidding.
Kidding about what?
Test.
Office hours, yeah, okay. So let's say you are too shy to speak up. You don't absolutely have to. It would be better for everybody in the room, and probably you too, and certainly me if you spoke up during class. But if you're not willing to do that, then use your other opportunities. Everybody here has to have, and I don't remember the new policy. Anyway, we have to have office hours. Use them. If the office hours don't work, approach your instructor. Say, hey, this time didn't work for me. If they don't say, well, then let's find a time, then I would tell somebody about that. Somebody they work for. Just like I would if they don't show up for class or if they're late every day. I'd be telling somebody who wears a suit. I don't. But don't think I won't be on that, because I will. You're not being mean by expecting somebody to do their job, right? Let's see here. Schedule study time versus study when you have time. Wow. It kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier. Do you schedule your time around, do you schedule studying around your life schedule? Or do you turn your life into studying, and then if you've got extra time, work the other stuff in? Do you understand what I just said? Is studying, is success in college honestly a priority to you? And a whole lot of people want to say yes, but that little small voice back there somewhere is saying, you're lying, you're lying. I didn't ask you what you wanted right now, I'm asking you what you want the rest of your life. Right? It goes back to work, it goes back to discipline. Do without now so you can have later. Right? Hey, I'd rather, whatever it is, party, whatever it is, too, when I was a student. But we've got to prioritize study time first. If there's any time left over, then maybe you can do something you want to do, which is important, right? You can't just study all the time or you go crazy. But prioritize the study time first. Where was I going to talk about effectiveness of studying instead of just time? Schedule study time, learning style. Wait a minute. I don't see where I put this. So let me stick this idea in there somewhere. It's not just about, and I think it is, but I don't remember where. It's not just about time on task. It's about effective time. I know I put this on there, I just don't remember where it is. If you're doing everything we've already said, if you're not, forget this. If you're doing everything we've already said, and you're being honest about it, and then you sit down and study one day, and it doesn't work. You ever done that? I mean, you've got the discipline, you've got the time scheduled, but it just doesn't work. Because I had times like that. Have you ever studied for an hour or two, and you didn't get any of it? You just totally wasted your time for whatever reason. Your brain just wasn't there. My opinion is you're better off closing your book and going and doing something else. Because ineffective study time equals anxiety. It equals frustration. You been there? You know what I'm talking about? You'd have spent 2 hours accomplishing nothing. Close your book and go do something else, right? Maybe it's maybe that's the time to wash the clothes. Or whatever the heck it is. Or maybe even have a little fun, right? Maybe watch Sons of Anarchy or some other quality television or whatever works for you. It's not just about quantity time, it's about quality time, right? But don't use that as an excuse to not study. I didn't say that. It's like some of these other things we've talked about. You got to be honest with yourself. I know that's in there somewhere. I don't remember where. Okay, learning style. You've got to study in a way that works for you. Learning style. I am not the right person to talk to you about learning styles. Because, well, I don't know why. Yeah, I do. Reading comprehension, I'm not wired for reading comprehension. Okay? Just didn't work for me. You know, we're all different in terms of the way our brains work. And it didn't work for me, so I can't really comment much on that. What I'm saying generally here is you got to find what works for you. If you're trying to do something that doesn't work, find something that does. Again, I was a notes guy. Unfortunately, this is the way it is, we largely teach the way we learn. Hopefully we as instructors are trying to also make the information accessible in other ways to address other learning styles. So listening, I mean, I'm putting the lecture capture this semester and some things. What did I say here about learning style? I'll find what works for you, attention, listen, right. Why did I say that? That kind of goes back to my notes thing. I'm going to campaign for my learning style here, note-taking, and there's some science associated with it. Some people are good at reading comprehension. They can learn by reading somewhat. Some people can learn by listening, and I'm not dissing those learning styles. Some people learn with animations and pictures. Not dissing any of that, okay? It's all good stuff. But there's a scientific reason why I would tell you that I don't care what anybody says. Writing, on top maybe of the other things, works. And it's a simple brain thing. So I talk about occipital lobe and temporal lobe in terms of seeing the information, maybe on a PowerPoint, hearing the information from a whatever it is, a lecture or whatever. But the act of writing is a motor sensory neuron thing, okay? There's no way, it's like practice, okay? I don't care if you're good at throwing darts or not, but I guarantee you, the more darts you throw, the better you'll be at it. It's a motor thing, and it ties into a part of our brain that talks to other parts of our brain. I don't care who you are. If you haven't tried taking notes, I bet you it'll work. You're saying, well, I've got a class, I've got an online class, and it's all auditory. So listen and write, okay? You can write the stuff. Read and write. Take notes while you're reading. Some people aren't note people. I'm telling you, you're missing something if you're not a note person. Certainly in my class, but in any type of delivery, try writing, okay? It's science. It works. So, hey, there you go. I talk about it, sensory motor cortex. So that's one reason for writing. And then the second one, we've already talked about that. If you don't write, now, let's see how to make this point. Definitions. I hate definitions. I do that on purpose, folks. I hate definitions because it turns an idea into a string of words. You can write down 16 words that I said in the order I said them, but that didn't mean you understood a dang thing. If I purposely present an idea without giving you an opportunity to write down a particular string of words, and that forces you to understand the idea, and I've already said this, process it, and then write it down. I said write it down in words that make sense to you. And that's real learning. You can listen to stuff and hear what's said. You can even remember it verbatim. Same deal with reading. But that isn't learning. There's a big difference in information and learning. What is learning, really? Learning isn't knowing the information that somebody told you. Learning is being able to use the information that somebody told you to solve problems. Okay? So, from class today. So you can memorize the function of a cell membrane, and you can memorize hypotonic, hypertonic, plasmolysis, plasmoptosis. But can you put all that together, like putting pieces of a puzzle together, to really understand the function of a cell wall? How cell walls interact with cell membranes. Whole different ball of wax. Hear it, understand it, write it in a way that makes sense to you. Draw pictures if you need to, but I'm campaigning for the effectiveness of note-taking. And I would argue with anybody who wants to argue with me that it works, okay? I would argue that PowerPoints ought to be made illegal, but that's my opinion. I'll let somebody else decide that for themselves. Reading comprehension. I wish I could talk to you guys about that. I am the wrong person for you to talk to about that. I'm not good at it myself, and I've never, yes I have. I found something that worked. I write down what I read. Get the key points, get the understanding. Next thing, make things mechanical. golly, that certainly works in my classes. That doesn't work as well in some classes. But if it's a class where you can take words and turn it into a picture in your mind in terms of seeing a machine work, and my students know, and it's true, just about everything. Folks, it worked for me in classes with 7s in front of physical biochemistry. I hope you never have to take a class that hard, but it worked in that class too. I can find something at my house, in my shop, in my basement, in my shed, to use as a wonderful model for just about everything I teach, okay? Now, a lot of classes aren't as tactile as something like biology, molecular biology, and cellular biology. But if it's a class, if it's a concept where you can do that, do it. See things mechanically, see how they're working, okay? See it as a simple machine, a simple idea. And I don't know if I said this on here, but here's the other thing. And then plug the words in. Here's, golly, I'm thinking of things that I wish I would have put on here. What difference does it make? You're listening to me. Don't let the words get in the way. That is so true of science. Don't let the words get in the way. Distal convoluted tubule. What the heck is that? Forget it. See the plumbing of the kidney. See how easy it works. And then understand that this piece is called a distal convoluted tubule. If it was at my house, it'd be called PVC, and I'd glue it together with PVC cement, and it'd be simple, okay? Understand the simplicity of the ideas before you let the words confuse you, all right? Does that make sense? Students do that all the time. I see it in science all the time. And we got to know the words, but you make that secondary. Not secondary in terms of their importance, but secondary in terms of the learning process. Does that make sense? That's a big one. Certainly in science it is. I told them today, I could teach, well, no I can't, I'm not a physicist. If I were a physicist, I could teach every lab with, give me a toy car and some string and a little ramp and a ball. You can do everything in a physics lab with that, okay? You can see how it works and then do the math and stuff. But yeah, math too. Don't put the math in the way. Understand the idea and then put the math in. Some people would argue with me on that, but most people that works with. Predict questions as you study. If I'm doing my job and you're paying attention, if I asked you guys from lab today to write down the 10 most likely questions that could be on the next lab quiz, I bet you almost all of them would be on there. If you're paying attention, you see what's coming before it gets there, right? Predict the questions. It's a wonderful way to study.
That has a lot to do with the quality of the professor, though, as well.
The assumption being that I'm doing my job.
That isn't always the correct assumption.
And part of your job is to not let them get away with not doing their job. We've already had that chat a little bit. Assuming that you're honest about the fact you've done your job, right? And I'm not saying you're not, but 99 out of 100 students aren't being honest about what they've done. You know, we all want to point our finger at somebody else, all of us. That's human nature. Anyway, it's just like anything else. I go to McDonald's and get a raw hamburger and I don't say anything. My bad. Okay. So predict the questions. I tell my students all the time, make out your own tests. I don't know how many of my students do that. Make out your own tests. Before my tests, I go over the tests. I tell my students, you know, that there's 2 matching sections. And the first matching section is called whatever it's called, parts of a cell. And they've already heard the lectures, so I ask them, okay, what words do you think are going to be in the word bank? And they make a list because they've already heard the lectures, right? This is with matching. Doesn't work with everything. I'm getting ahead of myself. We're not down to testing yet. But I'll go ahead and say it. So you make a list of the words that you think are going to be in the word bank, and here's the best part, you're not done yet, you haven't done the important part yet. From the answers, write questions. Predict the questions. It's a wonderful way of studying. Predict questions, just study, make out your own test. Rewrite notes. Wow, that's hugely important. I talk a whole lot about that here. Well, actually I don't, but I should. Why rewrite notes? There's a whole lot of reasons to rewrite notes. You write something twice, you remember it a whole lot. You remember it 10 times as long. I don't know. I said times 2, it's a lot more than times 2. But there's a whole lot more to it. You take notes, you're in a hurry, you're in class, right? You got all this stuff. It's kind of a mess. You go back and you rewrite them. For me, here was some things, some reasons why rewriting notes worked really well for me. I could take that mess from class and I could clean it up, rewrite and clean it up. Another thing by cleaning it up is I made the note shorter. There's a whole lot of psychology here. You got 30 pages of notes. Oh my God, I'm not going to learn 30 pages of notes. Rewrite your notes, condense them. Now it's 10 pages of notes. It's the same amount of stuff, but that part of your head back there that's saying you can't do it now believes you can do it because you can tell yourself there's not as much stuff even though there is. Is that dumb? Word for me. Okay? Psychology. And then the third thing is by rewriting your notes, you find out what you don't understand. And then you can go ask questions. We already talked about asking questions. You can't ask questions if you don't know what you don't know. I say this all the time in my classes. The worst situation you can be in life is to not know that you don't know. Did you get that? If you don't know that you don't know, then how the heck are you going to respond to it?
Well, I have professors all the time in class saying, any questions? And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't understand this well enough to formulate a question. So can you re-explain that? And then maybe I'll have a question.
Or let me look over tonight and get back with you. Rewrite, that's the point I'm making. Is you find out in the process of rewriting your notes what you understand, what you don't.